uh, to this webinar, the APEA April webinar. And today's topic would be how to make your programs and evaluations community-led and 2 learning tools to show the way. So my name is Christina Semsingha. I'm a social sciences researcher and an evaluator, and I will be your moderator today. I would like to hand over the floor to Rod Myers. Rod is a social environmental scientist, and he will be doing the opening remarks for this webinar.
Hi, everyone. It's great to have everybody here and see such a great crowd. We're here tonight to talk about the concept of what community-led means. And when we hear about community-led or even participatory work, we have as many ideas as people in the room. The terms are often used but seldom understood, let alone understood consistently, and then implementation is a whole nother issue. Even when they're implemented, what do we mean when we say community-led? Just how community-led is it? How do we know when it's community-led and when it's not? And who is the community anyway? These are often not easy answers to deal with in the context of evaluation and project delivery. We're dealing in very complex environments. And today, you'll learn about a set of tools that will help you to understand what community-led work really means and serves as a tool that assists the assessment of this question in the context of project design, implementation, and evaluations. This is a really valuable missing tool, I think, out there that will really help concessionaires, evaluators, implementers and communities alike to align their expectation of what community-led really means. What you're going to hear today is not about some abstract idea about what community-led works means, but really some practical tools that help to enable critical reflection on community leadership in development projects. So I really look forward to the speakers tonight, and I hope you do too.
Thank you, Rod. And before I hand over the floor to the speakers, I would like to mention the partners for the webinar today. We have the Center for Evaluation from the University of Jayewardenepura, Sri Lanka, and then Outreach International, the Movement for Community-Led Development, and the APC Hub. I would also like to set some house rules some ground rules for the webinar. Please keep your microphone and video disabled throughout the webinar, just to make sure that there are no disruptions. And then if you have any questions for the speakers, leave them in the chat bar, and then we'll take it up during the Q&A session. We will share the recording of the webinar later on the APEA website and the YouTube channel, so you can always go back to it. Having said all of that, let me introduce the speakers for today. First, we have Gunjan Veda. She is the Global Secretary and Executive Director for the Movement for Community-Led Development. And she brings a wealth of experience from both grassroots and policy spaces to center community in development efforts. And then with her, we have Eileen Cloter. She is the Senior Director of Research and Advocacy at Outreach International, Kansas City, USA. And her practice and research interests include community leadership and locally led monitoring and evaluation and practice. She is a social anthropologist by training. So, and together they have co-edited a book called Community-Led Development in Practice. We power our own change. So I think there's so much to learn from the two of you. Welcome, Ellen and Gunjan. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Christina. And hello, everyone. I think it's evening for most people. But greetings for whatever time of the day it is in your part of the world. As Christina said, I am Gunjan Veda, and I have the honor of serving as the Global Secretary for the Movement for Community-Led Development. Aline, can we get the PowerPoint up? Perfect. So for those of you who don't know, the Movement for Community-Led Development is a majority world-led network of networks with over 2,000 local and community-based organizations and their ING or allies like Outreach International. And the tools that we're going to be sharing today are tools that were developed by the collaborative research team of the movement, which I had the honor of leading during that period. So I want us to go back a little bit in time, right? Think 2019. So this is pre-pandemic, right? This is pre all the commitments, the recent slew of commitments that we saw to locally led development and shifting power and all the momentum about it. And I remember that at that time when we would go to meetings and tell people, but you know, this top-down approach is not working. We have to be more community-led. They would turn around and go, yeah, that sounds nice. What's the evidence that it works, right? And so we asked ourselves, well, where do we find this evidence of the impact of community-led development? And we said, well, we have all these wonderful evaluation reports sitting in the offices of people. Surely they will have all the evidence that we need in the world to demonstrate why community-led development is the way to go. So we asked our members, within a week, we got over 400 reports. Fantastic. And I was kind of brought into the movement at that time to actually do the study. And I started looking at these reports and suddenly realized, oh my God, I don't even know if these programs are community-led. There is nothing in these programs, in these reports that tells me that this work is community-led, right? So we began to have discussions where we began to ask, so how does one know if our programs are truly community-led, right? Because if we don't know that, and if we don't have that in the evaluation reports, how do we even establish correlation, right? So forget attribution. How would you even look at contribution? That was a key question. And so we realized that even though we were part of this movement, there was no common understanding of what is community-led development. And that is where the big gap was. So we began to do what movements do. We reached out to our membership to say, we have these questions that we want to answer. What is community-led development? What are its essential characteristics and processes? How do we establish that our work is community-led? And how do we ensure that our evaluations capture that and are truly community-led also, right? So over 100 people from different parts of the world volunteered and became part of this collaborative research team. And together we went through a process of dialogue, literature reviews, consultations, feeding into our own experiences. And over 2.5 years, through different working groups, we came up with 3 things. So we looked at 173 programs across 65 countries to see what are organizations doing when they say they're doing community-led work, right? Then we looked at we established 9 dimensions, which we felt after all of that research, 2.5 years, were integral to the practice of community-led development. 7 of these are characteristics, 2 processes. Aline will talk about them later. And that became the participatory CLD assessment tool, a tool that will help organizations. It's a learning focused tool, not an evaluation tool. It's a learning focused tool to help organizations understand how community-led their work is. How are different parts of a community experiencing that, right? Because we know that not everybody in the community experiences a program the same way. So how do different people in the community experience it? And how do you work with the community to make the program more community-led? And then we got to the evaluation problem. So we established a quality appraisal tool for CLD evaluations, which did something I think was remarkable. It expanded the definition of quality in evaluations to not just include rigor, but to include adherence to principles of community-led development. Because if we're truly serious about those principles, they should be part of our quality check. And that should enable us to actually see in the evaluation report itself if the program is community-led or not, which was the first problem that we started with, right? If we go to the next slide, please. So today we're going to be talking about these two things, the two tools that you see here, which we did not set out to create, but they emerged out of this huge need as we were speaking with our members and having these discussions. And these tools are now being used all over the world. When we launched them in January 2021, we thought, it's going to take time. We'll have to go and convince people. Overnight, there were hundreds of downloads. Today, they're available in over 9 languages. They're being used in, different countries. We don't even know the extent of the usage. Every day we hear new cases of them being used. So what we're going to share today is a little bit about these two tools. We'll focus a little more on the participatory CLD assessment tool, just because if your program itself is not community-led monitoring and evaluation doesn't really make much sense, right? So we're going to start there, but we'll also tell you about this other tool. We'll share some resources, including this new book, which, gives you the framework for the tool, so that you can refer to it. And then we'll have questions and answers. So Elaine, over to you.
Thank you, Kunjan. Yes, so as Kunjan said, we're going to share a little bit more about these two tools, and I'm going to set us off and start us off by talking about the participatory community-led development assessment tool. Now, why am I not moving onward? Let's see what's going on. There we go. So what is the tool itself? As Kunjan mentioned, we designed the tool not necessarily as an evaluation tool, but rather as an assessment tool, as a learning tool, right? For stakeholders across the board, so that is funders, people at a local level implementing programs, people participating in programs themselves, so that they can understand to what extent their programming and their interventions reflect community-led development principles. So in other words, and characteristics. So in other words, you can say, to what extent are their programs community-led, or they can understand the community-ledness of their interventions and their program. And then they can use the outputs of this tool, and so the information that the tool yields for them, they can then use that as information to course correct. They can say, okay, we want to maybe do a little bit better in this area of the work. This is what we're going to do, and these are the things that we're going to incorporate into our programming to increase a little bit that side of the work for us toward greater community-led development, increasing that. The tool can also be used at different moments in the program cycle. You can use the tool, for lack of a better word, as a baseline, and then do it again in different periods of your program. You can even do it in the beginning to understand just basic understanding of community development work with your programs in whatever capacity you are working. And then the program is structured, or the tool is structured as a rubric with different statements, and I'm going to show those to you here in a little bit. As Kunjan mentioned, the tool has really taken off so beautifully and is now translated in several languages, the languages that you can see on the screen. The tool is very accessible in that it's a web-based version at this point, an application. It's open source, so it's immediately available to people. And it is also allowing for immediate visualization, which is so helpful. It gives an immediate impression for you on the level of your work and the CLD-ness of your program. And then if in case you want to have more an Excel version, we also have that available for sharing, or it's also available in that format. And then as Kunjan was saying, the core basic background frame of the tool is the 9 dimensions of community development. That has come through the work that Kunjan shared earlier through the working groups. Now, what are those 9 dimensions? On the left, you see a kind of infograph that summarizes the dimensions. And on the right, you see how these dimensions are reflected in the tool itself. So what are those dimensions? I'm going to quickly go through them. What the tool looks at, for example, as far as participation, inclusion, and voice is concerned, that's the first of the dimensions and potentially also the biggest one within the tool. The tool is curious not only about whether people participate, but it wants to know to what extent people are included in the conversations, to what extent some people are included, others not. And it also wants to understand the quality of the participation, who has voice, who does not have voice, who have the opportunity to participate and in what level they can participate and the extent of their participation. Included in the tool, as is also the dimension on local knowledge and resources, wanting to understand whose knowledge is being used, to what extent is it being used, whose resources are being used, how are those resources incorporated into the programming. Then the next dimension is around sustainability and exit strategies, to understand to what extent programs have built into their design and exit strategy. Kunjan, we have since moved on a little bit on the language on this, thinking more about exit strategies in terms of changing of the partnership. To understand, we don't completely, potentially within CLD, completely exit from a program, but the relationship with that particular program and community people and participants and practitioners change a little bit. And you can read more about the really beautifulness of how that dimension has evolved in the book. I'll get to that shortly. Then accountability is a big dimension. It talks about and evaluate and assess is a better word. It assesses the directions of accountability. Is there upward accountability? Are there downward accountability? Multi-directional accountability? And who then is holding who accountable with regard to that directions? An important component within community development is contextuality. To what extent are programs responsive to local context and the nuances that comes with such context? Very important in CLD is collaboration. So the tool is also curious about that. Who is collaborating in what way? Who's involved in the work being happening? And closely related to that is then also the connection of the work with working with and collaborating with subnational governments. And those 2 dimensions are really nicely, closely connected. Then the last 2 dimensions, and you can see they are shaded a little bit differently, is monitoring, evaluation, and then facilitation. And they are shaded differently because we see them as processes, right, that continuously happen throughout programs. And so the tool then also want to assess to what extent are monitoring evaluation processes included in a program community-led. And in this case, the whole process of monitoring from the design all the way through to data sharing, reporting at the tail end of a monitoring evaluation process. So to what extent are communities truly and deeply involved, but also have ownership over that process, all the way from design to data dissemination toward the end. And then, of course, facilitation, which is a core component of community development. The tool asks really, really engaging questions about the quality of that facilitation so that programs can learn a little bit more about that. Okay, so as Kunjan mentioned, these 9 dimensions have become really productive for us to think about community development. I have gone through the dimensions very, very quickly now. But if you are curious about the dimensions and want to learn a little bit more about how we think about them and how they show up and manifest through community development interventions, they are incorporated into our edited volume on community development in practice. Basically, what the book does is it takes these dimensions and then showcase different case studies, for lack of a better word, on these different dimensions within different programs. We are especially proud of the volume because it showcases community development activities at scale. So really, really small interventions to really, really bigger interventions across different international spaces within the majority world. And then we are also proud of how the volume is incorporating voices across the board, from practitioners all the way to academia and academics, and all who have contributed to this volume. So we do encourage you, if you're curious, to take a look at this volume. All right, so back to the tool. How does the tool work? So a first page of the tool introduces or captures like basic information of a program, and that can allow a program to then use the information that they gain from the assessment tool as a baseline or a midline and for further comparison along the way. And then these are, here you see two screenshots of the tools, of different pages of the tool. You will see here on the left-hand side is dimension number 1, and that's participation, inclusion, and voice. You will see that at the top there's a statement, and then different statements below that where participants of the tool or people who use the tool can then grade the extent to which their program satisfies those different statements. And you will also see at the bottom is a comment box. And that comment box is a very, very valuable component of the tool because there it is encouraged for people participating in and using the tool to incorporate there and leave their comments as to why they scored the way that they did. And this is very helpful if programs want to come back and use the tool again, so that they can see why they scored in a particular way. Additionally, if teams want to use the tool individually, so different team members use the tool on their own, they incorporate their comments there, and those comments can then be condensed or summarized, and then that gives an additional qualitative component to the assessment itself. And so on the right-hand side, you see how the monitoring evaluation dimension is featured within the tool. And you can also see the statement with then different responses in a rubric format. Visualization is then very straightforward. The tool at the top has then the option for you to click on the visualization, and then that immediately appears for you. Here you see you can have a visualization of all the dimensions in the form of a spider graph. And you can see that the ideal would be for programs to have a bigger spider, right? That the green area becomes bigger and bigger and wider. And here programs can then see, oof, you know, which dimension did we do good in? Which dimensions did we do not so good in? And they can ask questions. What are we going to do about that particular dimension? Why are we not potentially doing so good in one dimension and then doing very well in another? And what is our plan going forward? And then what the tool also allows is if you want to dig a little bit deeper in each of the dimensions, you can also see the scoring for that dimension to understand, you know, in a particular dimension, where can we do better? For example, with regard to participation and monitoring evaluation, that dimension, which aspect do we want to focus on a little bit more to increase then our score going forward? Okay, back to you, Kunjan, to talk a little bit more on how the reach of the tool thus far.
Yes. So, I mean, I know as practitioners, one of the first questions is, okay, great, sounds wonderful. Has it actually been used, right? And as I mentioned, we were just surprised at how extensively and how much the tool is being used by different constituencies. The first is INGOs, and that's, I will confess, when we were designing the tool, that's the group we had in mind, because we said, well, INGOs are the ones that need to make sure their programs are community-led. So INGOs definitely using it. Here you have an example, you know, pictures from a session of using the tool with community members in Bui area in Ethiopia. And this is really interesting to show you the power of the tool, right? Because so we did a training in Bui in Ethiopia in 2023 for the World Vision team there. And then we went to Bui, the community that they work in, they have an area development program in to understand how community-led the program was, right? And we learned a lot of things. But the big missing link was that the program was supposed to transition out in less than 3 years. And nobody in the community was aware of that fact. They didn't even know that in 3 years, all of this is going to go away. Now, interestingly, the World Vision team changed. And so in 2024, they invited me again to run the training. And I went there and we did the training. And then we went to use the tool in the community, because in the training, we actually have a tool use session to really see the power of it and the power of the dialogue that the tool enables. Because the whole staff had changed, we landed up going to the exact same community we had been in a year ago. And I was looking at the faces and going, these seem familiar. What's going on here? And this time the answers were completely different. The draft changed. And so we were like, what happened here? And then the people said, after the conversation last time, we suddenly realized that these guys are going to go away in 3 years, and we are not ready for it. And so for the last year, every month when World Vision comes in, there's a dedicated time where we spend together thinking of how will we get to that. We have identified the roadmap and everything. We still don't want them to go away, but we know we are ready now. We're prepared, right? Within a year, no follow-up, just by accident, we discovered how much had changed. And that's the power of the tool. So it's being used by a whole number of INGOs, from the Hunger Project to World Vision. I believe Elaine Outreach International has used it. Others are using it back, Core Africa. Next slide, please. But then there were people we never expected who would use the tool. I mean, communities, yes, this is from Malawi, where community leaders are actually using the tool to hold NGOs to account and say, what are you doing here? Well, why aren't we consulted? Why was the library built here? We never asked for it here. We think it should be in this space, right? All of those discussions happening. Now, the most surprising too, if we go to the next slide, was actually community-based organizations. Now, we went into this with the assumption that community-based organizations will be community-led in their work, right? They don't need the tool. And it was so surprising that the first group of people who actually used this tool was in Benin, a group of youth community-based organizations. And they said, no, actually, we may be community-based, but our work is not community-led. And we want it to be. So these are, again, pictures from, in Benin, where a CBO called Casa Grande was using the tool with the community. And you'll see in every picture, it looks slightly different and slightly same. It's same in that it's a group of people, it's a dialogic process. It's different because people use whatever is available. Sometimes it's charts and markers, sometimes it's stones, sometimes it's their hands to communicate. And then the final constituency that has been using this tool, very surprisingly, was local governments. Now, we had never intended for this tool to be used by local governments. But what we forgot was the power of collaboration. Because of the 100 people who were involved in this process, there were local government representatives. And so the tool and its elements were relevant to them. So both in Canada, where municipalities are using it, and in Kenya, county governments like Taita Taveta that you see here, we trained the entire team, and they have been using the tool every year with the communities to see, are the participatory processes instituted by the government truly participatory? This is Makwene County, Taita Taveta County. So we are, again, seeing this. In fact, we had to develop a version of the tool. So Aline showed you the tool earlier, and she showed you the page where you have to put in some background information. It actually asks you who you are, a local government, a CBO, or an INGO, because the tool changes slightly depending on who you are. So it's a living tool, or both of the tools that we will be talking about are living tools. They are evolving as we go through them, as practitioners use them. But they can be used for a whole number of reasons, to see how community-led it is over time, to examine a portfolio of programs, to learn from programs across different areas. Okay, so that was about the CLD assessment tool. But we talked about the second tool, right? And I'm going to spend the last 5 minutes on that. This is the CCAT, or the community quality appraisal tool for CLD evaluations. Now, this tool was developed by a group of evaluators. Unlike the first tool, which was evaluators, program professionals, everybody mixed, right? And this had to really do with the issue that we faced when we first started on this work, that looking at an evaluation report, I couldn't even tell that the program was community-led. So how do I even know if any of the impact was because the program was actually community-led, right? And we realized that these were considered to be really good quality evaluations. So why was this happening? Well, because our definition of quality only talked about rigor. And in CLD programming, it is so important that communities are part of the monitoring and evaluation process. So adherence to CLD principles was the missing dimension in quality, which we added. So this tool is very simple. It's only in Excel. It's in 3 languages currently. And the reason for that is that while the CLD assessment tool can be used by anybody and everybody, this tool is really used by evaluators or commissioners of evaluation, right? An Excel sheet is something evaluators are comfortable with. Community folks are not. So now this tool it's simple Excel. It has 2 sheets. The first one just tells you what the tool is, how to use it, what the scoring criteria is, right? And then the second sheet is the actual tool. And if we go there, Elaine, I can talk a little more about it. So this has a set of questions. Now, some questions have a blue CLD mark on it. So those are questions which test the quality in terms of adherence to CLD principles, right? And the rest are questions to do with rigor, to do with, information flow, all of that information. Now, these are weighed. So we've had medium priority, high priority, and low priority. And there is a world in which you can actually adjust that. We have also not left it ambiguous. So we just have a question and have you rate it, right? We've actually defined how to rate it. And there are 3 possible answers. There is a yes, a no, and a partial. Now, as with the other tool, the importance of this is in the comment section, where you actually capture the conversation or your reasons for giving a particular score. Once you do that, you see a final score. If you go to the next slide, Elaine. Yeah. Now, again, the scoring you get is divided into 2 components. So you'll get a score overall, right? So you'll see that, oh, it's 28 overall. So it's an excellent evaluation, quality evaluation. But maybe the CLD score, in this case, it's 9, but maybe it's 5. And then you know that, but the one missing part in this, it's not really highlighting the community-led features of the program and how community-led the monitoring and evaluation process itself was. Was the community part of the indicators development? Was the community part of the testing, right? Did the community know what was being done? All of those things is not happening, and that's where we need to improve. So this tool was designed so that when we do our evaluations, they can actually, if it is for a CLD program, the evaluation reports can actually capture elements of CLD. They can tell us how the programs were community-led. They can tell us how the evaluation process itself was or was not community-led. All right, so I'm going to pause there. We have put in the links to both the tools in the in the chat box. So you can look at the 2 tools, you can download them. Both of them are, like I said, open source. They are being used as is by most organizations. Some have tailored them to their own users. The last thing I want to flag in 10 seconds is that, a lot of people look at the quality appraisal tool and say, is this for qualitative? Is it for quantitative? Is it for mixed methods? When we started out, we started with 3 different groups: qualitative, quantitative, mixed methods, to identify what are the key questions to assess the quality of evaluations. Surprisingly, when we said that we have to only bring it down to, say, a dozen questions, those questions were not very different. And so we have one tool which can be used for qualitative, quantitative, or mixed methods. It doesn't matter. This tool is still relevant. And with that, I think we were going to open it for questions, just to say that community-led development and community-led work is a continuous process. If the book, the tools show us anything, it is that it's a journey. There is no, perfect CLD program. There is no perfect CLD evaluation. What we have to keep doing, and what these tools enable us to do, is how do we become more community-led in the work that we do? Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was very interesting, very practical and a pragmatic approach to community led work. Because we talk about it, but most of the time we don't know how to do it. And you've just you've developed two, not just one, but two tools that we can actually use. So if we will open up the floor to anybody who has questions, you can unmute and then ask from us. We didn't get many messages on the chat. I think you've done a wonderful job in explaining. I think nobody had any questions. Maybe I'll ask something that I was thinking of. How adaptable, or how does these tools work in different contexts, like political, social, cultural context? Because that's like so important when it's when we face reality. Like, do you have any? I know that you shared a few pictures, but and also stories. But do you have any like insights on how these tools work?
Yeah. So, Christina, the beauty of these tools is that they were developed by multi-country teams working together,
Right.
right? And again, we didn't design the process that way. But when we were looking at, we were amazed by the different countries, different types of organizations, right? Tiny CBOs from one community to a huge organization like World Vision using the same tool. It's a little bit like, oh, okay, is it the context is not the same? But because the tools are designed as frameworks, right? And the meat of the learning is in the conversation that emerges. It allows for that context, constant adaptation, right? It can be used across context. We do have, like I said, we had to make certain adaptations, which were much more in terms of who the user is as opposed to the country, right? So if you're a local government, you don't exit a community. You don't want your government to exit, right? But there are changes in the governments. So the questions are different slightly. Also, there are countries, for instance, where there are no governments, or where it's difficult or impossible to work with local governments. So again, you don't have to go over every dimension in the tool. And that's the beauty of it. You take what is suited to your context. And I think that's part of the reason we have seen such an extensive use of the tools. I don't know, Adeline, if you want to add anything to it.
No, Kunjan, I think that summarizes it very well. In principle, the work that we are doing is community-led, and we want our tools to reflect the principles of community-led development. And one of that is the adjustability to local context, the openness to being adjustable and being flexible. And I think that's what the tool reflects in a beautiful way.
Yeah. We have a question from Simone. Have you experienced any challenges when using the tools?
Yes. Yes, we have. And I think the biggest challenge if you look at the tool, it sounds great, 9-dimension, covers a lot. The biggest challenge is, and I'm speaking specifically to the participatory CLD assessment tool, it's very long. The tool has almost 27 questions. If you had to do them through a dialogic process, and we have a whole guide available on how to use the tool, because that's what's important, it would take you a whole day with the community, right? So how do you do it? And so over the years, we have now found different ways in which different groups do it. But I think that's a key challenge of, it is extensive. But then the beauty is you don't have to do it all together. And there are different ways in which it can be done to make it a 2 to 3 hour exercise, which is typically what we recommend in terms of doing it. But I would say that was a big challenge. The other challenge was just language. And that's the reason you see so many language adaptations of it, because the community doesn't understand English and a literal translation doesn't work. So it has to be a translation that reflects the meaning of it. And that we realized couldn't happen instantly, because so many of us are used to, just on the spot translating of a tool and using it. But that doesn't work with this. You have to do that earlier and keep it. And the third thing is trained facilitators. The entire tool is about facilitation as a CLD work. So it needs to be somebody who is able to engage the community in an honest discussion and handle power dynamics. So again, we have tips on how to handle power dynamics. How do you facilitate these sessions? How do you create groups so that different voices can be heard? So those would be some of the key challenges for the participatory CLD tool. For the evaluation, the CCAT, I would say the biggest challenge is people try to apply it for programs that are not community-led. And to me, that's a waste of time. To me, your program, if monitoring and evaluation is community-led or CLD congruent, the program has to be CLD. So I would say that's been the biggest thing. But Elaine.
No, I think that's, again, sums it up very nicely, Kunjan. I think another thing too is to see the learning that comes through using the tool. And I think, Kunjan, you made reference to this before, but if I can also be transparent, and I see that Rose, my colleague from the Philippines, is also on the call. As Kunjan mentioned, we use the tool with some of our programs, and I think practitioners and programs go into using the tool thinking that they are as community-led as it can be, and then the tool reveals some areas where they can improve or where they can ask really interesting and engaging questions. And then for those to happen and for that to take place and to come to that place of, well, let's talk about this, that takes time, as Kunjan was saying. And so it's not an easy one of check the box and get the results kind of tool, but it's a tool for engagement. It's a tool that encourages that questioning and answering and asking the challenging questions within your organization. Where are we not faring as well as we thought we would? And now what are we going to do about it in going forward? So that's what I would add to that, Kunjan and Christina.
Yeah, I can see that we have Hasun who has raised his hand. But before I give the floor to Hasun, can I read one more question, because it's an extension of the question that was answered now. How can small NGOs with limited funding and staff adapt participatory community-led assessment tools in a practical and a sustainable way?
Do you want to take the other question also,
Yes.
or do you want us to address this first?
Yes, I can just quickly speak to that. Thank you for the question. As we mentioned, the tools, first of all, the tools are open access. And second of all, we think about the tools as also a facilitating initiative. So incorporating that into your program And if practitioners are interested and undergo the training, they can do and they can facilitate these questions and they can facilitate the tool within their contexts and within their areas. So in that sense, limited funding shouldn't keep you from using the tool. In fact, I think that's what makes the tools so democratic, right, Kujan? Because you can use the tools regardless of your funding structure.
Absolutely. So some of the, the tool is most popular actually among the smaller organizations.
Yeah.
Because it requires no additional resources except facilitators.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hasoon, if you want to unmute and ask your question.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for your nice presentation. And it was a mind-blowing tool. We are waiting for that use. My question is that the community-led evaluations have a different level. They have a different definitions. Within the scope, some of actively involved for designing the evaluation, some actively involved for conducting. Even right now we discuss in call mail, which means the all reporting also based on the community-led experience, which means that community responsible for the providing reports as well. Have you concerned those all different level of interventions? I mean, the community level interventions when you were developing this tool?
Yes. So a few things, Kasan, you're absolutely right. CallMel looks very different, just like community-led development looks very different, right? And part of the reason for actually getting the tools was that sometimes they look so different that it's so difficult to say, well, how do we assess our progress against, right? I will say that the way we in the movement look at CallMel, and we have a whole Unlearning Lab series that has been going on for a year and a half on community-led monitoring, evaluation, and learning. And earlier I saw colleagues from Philippines who had done some of the sessions on it. I saw Nancy on this call. But we look at CallMel as there is CallMel, where the community is involved in every part of the cycle, right? All the way from what is your evaluation question against which you are measuring success? So what are you measuring for? Through the measurements, the analysis, the dissemination, everything, and the decision-making and the action being taken. So we look at CallMel through that lens. And then we have what is CLD congruent evaluations, evaluations which are at least congruent with the principles of CLD, but may not really be fully CallMel, where the community is not part of every bit of the cycle, right? The quality appraisal tool, the CCAT, is designed for evaluation reports to make sure that the evaluation reports are capturing CLD congruence. So it's not CallMel fully, right? It is essentially, how do you make sure if you did do CallMel or if your evaluation was CLD congruent, how are you pulling that together, information together? But again, because there was such a wide array of practitioners involved in the development of the tools, I think we were able to capture different nuances, and that's why you have the different levels. And the tools, both the tools, see it as a journey. They don't see it as Aline was saying, it wasn't like this is the perfect ideal and you have to be there or nothing. We see it as a journey. Aline?
I agree. I'm also seeing we have colleagues from Salanga on the call, and they do also facilitate amazing processes as far as CallMel is concerned. And maybe just to add, Kunjan, the community, the monitoring evaluation component of the tool, and also the dimension that we include and write about in the book, thinks about and approaches monitoring evaluation as a component of the bigger work, right? So you have program implementation, you have all kinds of different things taking place in your program. And then monitoring evaluation is typically a part of your programming. And we then ask questions about how community-led is that aspect of your work. But I do, and it'll be great to hear also from our Salanga colleagues on the call. From Salanga and the call mail perspective, it is interpreted as a methodology across the whole program. And so I think there's a slight nuanced component there to the call-mail as we interpret it, and then call-mail more as a methodology across the full program scope. And that's my interpretation and also my appreciation of the work from Salanga's side.
Thank you. Thank you.
Gunjan and Eileen, we get a few questions asking about the different languages of the tool. Somebody wants to know if there's a Tamil version, how to access the English version of the tool. I think it got lost in the chat somewhere, so if you can let them know again, that would be great.
Sure.
We don't have Tamil yet, right? Should I say yet?
Yes, so we would love to. That's the yet there. So the reason we have so many different versions is that because in different countries, practitioners have actually gotten together, translated the tool, and then shared the translations. We would love to have Tamil. Our commitment is if you translate the tool, whatever the language, send it to us. We will get the app in that language for you so that it can be available. If the link that I had shared, and we can share it again in the chat for the tool, if you go into that, I'm unable to screen share, otherwise I would have shown you how to do it. But if you go into that, then on the top left column, top left, you will see something called EN, which is English. But if you keep clicking on that, it takes you to different languages. So unfortunately, it's not right now, it's just a click to arrive at your language because there are only 9. In the future, we will have a menu of language options to choose for. So it's a drop down. But right now, you just keep clicking on the EN and then you get to different languages. So Bangla is BD, Spanish is ES, French is FR.
Yeah, I can maybe share my screen again, or but I think the way that should I can quickly and then just point you again.
I have it open, Eileen. Let me.
Oh, you
show.
do? Okay.
So if I think because it was already a screen share that was on, I wasn't able. So, but I should be able to do it now. 1 second. Here it is. Okie dokie. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. Huh. Okay.
Hello?
Yep. No, if it's not coming still, then perhaps, Eileen, you may need to do it.
There it is.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so here, where you see EN, if you click, now this is the Spanish version. This is the French version.
Yeah.
This is the,
Okay.
yeah. So Chichua, I think LG is Chichua. So different versions. So just by doing this, you can go there, and then this brings the rest of the tool since I have a second here and we have this on the screen. So you basically just click on this, fill it out, go to the next question. And when you're done, as Eileen said, click on the graph and you get the graphs. And then if you click on this V47, you can actually just do a full report and it'll download the full report with the graphs and everything for you once you have the data in it. And again, this is stored in your computer. We don't even get to know if you use it. So, okay, I'll stop sharing.
Kunja, maybe Christina, there's one very interesting question from Greggy. Hi, Greggy, from the Philippines. Kunja, maybe you can speak to this. The tool being used in humanitarian contexts. I cannot think of an example, but perhaps you can.
Oh, humanitarian context?
Yes, the
Yes.
tool has been used in humanitarian context, and then what lessons you have gleaned from using it in those contexts.
Right. So a few things. It has been used in some of the contexts in which we used it in Ethiopia, for instance, were humanitarian. They weren't just the developmental context of World Vision programs. But we did find that the tool is too long for a humanitarian context. So 2 years ago, some people worked on developing a shorter version of this tool for humanitarian context. And they divided this into two parts. They said in humanitarian, we have response and we have long-term. So we have, we have preparedness, we have response, and then we have long-term. The tool as is can be used in preparedness. In fact, it's very important for preparedness, and it works in the long-term response. Where it does not work well is the immediate response, because that has to be something very quick. Nobody in the community is in that time, in a situation where they want to be pulled together to ask, what do you want, and stuff like that, right? So yes, I don't know if that fully answers, but yes, it can be used in preparedness and in longer term. And for response, there's a much shorter version of the tool, which we piloted. We piloted it, if I'm not mistaken, with the Red Cross and a few others. And that's there.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much, and Gunjan and Ellen. I think we are running a bit tight with time, but we want to take a group picture. So if everybody can open their cameras and give your best smiles, Ahmed will take a group photo.
Yes. Okay, everyone. Please open your camera now. We have two page, and start with page 1. Smile. And page 2. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. With that, I would ask Zia to give the closing remark. Zia is the CEO of Marlin Ideal Impact. And over to you, Zia.
Thank you, Christina. Greetings, everyone. It's easy for us to say we are community lead. However, we understand community lead is an interagency effort or a collective action from all the actors involved in delivering the services. It means it's not the duty of individual organizations, or the individual organizations and bodies are not able to bring huge improvements. Mainly the attention of donor institutions looks more essential to sustain this. As we mentioned, as Gunjan and Ellen mentioned in the slides, one of the dimensions, I mean the serial dimensions, one of those were accountability. And for accountability, there is a huge project in Afghanistan context, we call it Awas Afghanistan. That's a free hotline number. Now it took a form of program, years and years, to sustain accountability or improve that among the targeted populations. The discussion presented today is important and needs to be continued to sustain a community-led approach in practice. And today we have discussed two practical tools that help us move from a general picture to a more measurable and detailed approach. First, by assessing how community-led or program design and implementation truly are, and second, by ensuring our evaluations honor the same standards of local leadership's and accountability. Now it's up to us as the actors who are involved in the sector to pilot these tools in our next project cycle, share our experiences with peer, and together raise the bar for what community-led development can and should look like in our region and BI. Thank you everyone for your engagement today. It's over for me. Christina.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Zia. And thank you, Ellen and Gunjan. I have two announcements to make. The APEA conference this year will be held in Tokyo. The registrations are open now, so we invite all of you to register. The conference will be in November. I think most of you already know about it now, but yeah, join. And the next webinar will be in June. The topic is building evaluation culture in the parliament. And as you can see, we have speakers from covering a whole range of cross-cutting sectors. So please register and join in June. It's on the 4th of June at the same time. And with that, we will close. Thank you once again, and Ellen and Gunjan. It was really insightful. Thank you, both of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.